It's Thursday night. Welcome to Refuge. So I'm excited to be here. This lesson I've been going over this week, been running, been praying about. So I'm excited for it. It's exciting. It's I pray that what God has been trying to tell me is what will come out of my mouth. So I really pray that is the case. But as we know, Refuge always starts with announcements. So first of all, you can find us on Facebook. We try to post on there. I know a lot of you young, hip people aren't on there anymore. You're on this one right there, the little camera thing, that Instagram thing. Trying to get better at that. Bear with me as I try to do that. And of course, you're on YouTube Live. All the past Devos, videos, everything on YouTube Live. Believe me, I look forward to the day when I look out and see you sitting in these couches and in these chairs. I miss seeing you all deeply, and you don't know how much. So hopefully it'll warm up pretty soon, and all of us will get. I'll get the vaccine. Some of us old folks will get the vaccine, and we'll be able to be in each other's presence again. But until then, this is what refuge looks like. Now, best place to go. I say this every week. I know this. I know you understand this. The website. So go to the website. Always a good place to find out what's going on. And so you'll see things like Frisbee golf. If you're interested, you'll find the current events. You'll find a link to what I'm doing now, YouTube Live going on there. So all that's happening on there and previous refuge. So the other thing you just need to know about is Frisbee golf. Hey, I bought some discs. If you want to play, just let me know. Just reach out to me. If the weather's nice, afternoon, morning, let's play Frisbee golf together. Also, lunch. Just had lunch with Emily and Sarah. It was quite enjoyable. And tomorrow I'm going to have lunch with Ryland. Excited about that. If you would like to have lunch with me, reach out to me. I'm going to try to have lunch with everybody at least once during this semester. I look forward to that. But if you've got a time or if you've got something that works out good for you, reach out to me. Love to eat together. I'll pray over you. And we were going to have a God's love boxes, kind of like the Valentine's Day, except we're going to decorate those and make those and then share in each other, encourage one another, put little verses about God's love in those boxes. That was supposed to be the 13th. I think I'm going to postpone that a week, Lord willing, because the 13th, the high is 32 and the low is 20. I don't think many of you are going to want to gather in that type of weather. So that's been postponed for a week, but still want to do that. That's God's love boxes. We're going to have lunch together. So keep an eye out on the website. I'll also be sending out some reminders of that. But I apologize, that's been postponed because of weather. Now, this is kind of cool. Most of you know that February is Black History Month. Not just that we center on that only at that time and forget it the rest of the time, but it's a great time to be thinking these things. And something great in Memphis that just happened in honor of Black History Month. The tourism unveiled the roots of Memphis music. It's an art project. There's 24 round concrete bollards, and they're near the Forum. So if you're downtown near BB King and Bill Street, go check those out. So that's something cool in Memphis, new in Memphis, and celebrating Black History Month. So look into those. I think that's something cool. It's great to be in Memphis City with the Civil Rights Museum. So many great things here to celebrate how God created these things in his people. That's it for announcements. So always, selmamemphis.org. I want to share with you, some of you know that I met my lovely bride, Cheryl, over in Africa. We were in Botswana, and Cheryl taught for a while. She was a teacher. She's still a teacher. She teaches at Hope Works. But she would also tutor, and she was tutoring a young Indian girl. And so the parents found out that we enjoy Indian food. And so they invited us they were going to bring a meal. And what we said is we would love a really authentic Indian food. And we found out this family, they actually host two parties. One party was really for expats, and expats are people that are from foreign countries like Americans, everything, that were in that country. It was a little less traditional, but they also had a second meal, this Indian family did, and it was purely traditional for their Indian friends. And Cheryl asked them, you know what we would love? Me and my husband would love it if we could come to one of those meals that we've heard about, and we'd rather come to the one that's more authentic, that has the food that you all really enjoy, to share in your culture, to celebrate with you. And they were excited. They graciously invited us. And so Cheryl and I come to this party, we come into this house, and immediately, it's traditional in their culture, the men and women separated. I did not see Cheryl again till the end of that evening. But I tell you what, that memory, the way they treated us, the love they showed us, the food, they flew in two gentlemen that made the traditional bread, and they cooked it on these hot stones or coals. I could see them patting out the bread and making the bread, and they put it on there. Traditional bread making, traditional dishes. And the women were in their beautiful saris, the men had their beautiful outfits on, and they treated us as honored guests. They welcomed us into their family with their food, with their celebration, embracing us and sharing their culture. We may have seemed like outsiders, but they did not treat us like outsiders. That meal was an invitation into their life. It was an invitation saying, we love you, we accept you, come experience our culture. Let us share what means so much to us with you. Is it not surprising then that really this concept, this idea originated with Jesus the Christ? Jesus used a meal at the table and he turned the concept upside down. It made people upset, but it made those that were invited at that table so amazed and so welcome. And that's what we're going to look at today. The honored guests, the accepted, the part of the family, an invitation into shared life, into shared blessings. That's what Jesus and God do at the table. So Jesus invites the leftovers and the left outs. Let's look at a quote on page from a book. Sometimes it just says it so much better than I could say it. Let me read this to you. This comes from chapter 3 in the Ragamuffin Gospel. And this chapter is called the Ragamuffin Gospel. Jesus spent a disproportionate amount of time with people described in the Gospels as the poor, the blind, the lame, the lepers, the hungry, sinners, prostitutes, tax collectors, the persecuted, the downtrodden, the captives, those possessed by unclean spirits, all who labored and are heavy burdened, the rabble who knew nothing of the law, the crowds, the little ones, the least of these, the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Obviously, his love for failures and nobodies was not an exclusive love, for that would merely substitute one class prejudice for another. I like the way that puts it. Sometimes we think of Jesus being so among the poor and so enamored with the poor and so much loving the poor. And we tend to think poor financially, because everything in America is wrapped up in money, unfortunately. But it is the poor in spirit. Think back to Jesus and the Beatitudes, the Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are the poor in spirit. And those are the ones that he was reaching out to, those that were poor in spirit. Those that feel they don't deserve to be in the presence of God are exactly right. And that is why God and Jesus spend so much time offering the present of grace and love and acceptance to those very same people. We would often find that Jesus would be spending time with the people that were on the outskirts, that were not on the in. And that's why the religious people at that time were so mad at Jesus. He's bucking the system. He's going against everything that we've set up religiously. These people are not the ones that are following the law. They're not the ones that are making God happy. And Jesus comes along and turns all of this around and upside down and invites these lowly people. When Jesus is asked, who is the greatest in the kingdom? Let's look at his response. This comes from Matthew 15, verses 1 through 4, and then also read 10 through 14. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus saying, who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? And calling to him a child, he put him in the midst of them and said, "Truly I say to you, unless you turn and become like this little child, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven." And then verse 10. This is right before he goes into the parable of the lost sheep. "See that you do not despise one of these little ones, for I tell you that in heaven their angels always see the face of my Father who is in heaven. What do you think? If a man had 100 sheep and one of them goes astray, he does not leave the 99 on the mountain and go in search of the one that went astray. And if he finds it, truly I say to you, he rejoices over it more than over the 99 that never went astray. So it is not the will of my Father who is heaven that one of these little ones should perish." These little ones, this tells you how excited. This is why Jesus was so in love and spent time among sinners, because they're the ones that had gone astray. They're the ones that he wants to bring back into the family, back into the fold. He's the ones who know you are accepted. You are wanted in my presence. You are not excluded from the table. Right? Jesus came for sinners, not for the righteous. Luke 18:17 says, "Truly I say to you, whoever does not receive the kingdom of God like a child shall not enter it." Sometimes I think even I have gotten these verses wrong. I like the perspective that we're going to talk about now. There is a dear young friend of mine. Her name is Rosalind. She is the daughter of Justin and Charlie Audrey. Some of you know Justin is on our board of overseers, and Charlie is on that too with her little daughter Rosalind. I just love her so much. Sheldon, I love her. But she'll come over to our house, and she knows as soon as she enters in that front door, she'll say, "I want a flavor." Now, any of you that have gone on a mission trip with me or have gone out into the woods with me, have gone out somewhere, you know that I love fruit snacks. I love fruit strips. I love fruit flavors. I always get the organic ones. My latest thing is these sour raisins. I love fruit snacks. Well, that's what she means by flavors. Rosalind comes in and immediately she says, "I want a flavor." And she starts walking to our food pantry and knows where they are. She doesn't, she just knows what she wants. And I love that about her. It's not as if she comes in saying, "Well, let me tell you what good I've done today so I can have that fruit strip." Or she doesn't go through the niceties that we as adults seem to have. "How was your day? Tell me about your day." She comes in and she wants her flavor. And she knows she's going to get it from me. I love sharing those with her. And so as we get older, I sometimes wonder if we try to justify our faith, if we try to live into our good works, if we try to say, "God, your grace, I understand it's a gift, but I have done feeding the poor this week. I did help a little old lady cross the street. I did offer kind words to my neighbor." I wonder if we sometimes forget that it is just a total gift from God, nothing we have earned or gotten. Jesus invites us into a new life with God. He invites us to accept it like children. In baptism, it says we are made a new creation, a new creature in Christ, that all the past is done away with. So whatever accomplishments we have or whatever regrets we may have been crucified with Christ. But to receive that, we receive it like a child. You receive it like a fruit snack, just saying, "Hey, I want my salvation. I want my grace. I want what you are offering." Coming like a child, realizing that you did nothing to earn that flavor of salvation and grace. And so we may think, and just like I love Rosalind, but we need to look at it from the Jewish perspective. When we read these verses, we tend to to have a very high opinion of children. We love our children. Look how many toys are offered for children. Look at Christmas time when it's all about the children. But in Jewish society, this was not the case. And so I want to read a quote from you, and this comes from Albert Nolan in his book, Jesus Before Christianity. And so we need to understand exactly how they viewed children in their culture, because this will give us a whole new insight into what Jesus was talking about when he talked about the children. Bring the little children to me, receive the kingdom of heaven like a child. It is important to remember the Jewish attitude toward children in first century Palestine if we are to grasp the full force of Jesus' teachings here. In the present day, we tend to idolize childhood as the happy age of innocence and simply faith. But in New Testament times, the child was considered of no importance, meriting little attention or favor. Children in that society had no status at all. They did not count. The child was regarded with scorn. So you can imagine when Jesus is saying you must become like a child, or to accept the kingdom of heaven, you must accept it like a child, or the greatest in the kingdom of heaven is a child. They would be like, what? Children? They're of no count. They can't do anything. There is no worth in the children, besides maybe passing on your name. And that's about it. But they were looked on scornfully. They weren't as celebrated as they are in our culture. So that gives you a whole new idea into what Jesus is talking about. In becoming like a child, we recognize we are unimportant or of little worth in what we can do to earn grace or forgiveness. It's not childlike innocence, it's childlike acceptance that God and Jesus are looking for. Because we aren't innocent, but the acceptance of what he has to offer, this great gift, is what he is offering. He's offering that to the least of these, the sinners, the tax collectors, the prostitutes, the lame, the blind, those that are filled with shame and inferiority. He welcomes into his presence and say, gladly receive the kingdom that I have to offer you. The kingdom was theirs. Luke 12:32, fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. In another verse, Jesus praises the Father, for he has hidden these things from the wise and the smart and offered them to the least of these. These people that were poor in spirit got it. And the religious leaders, the Pharisees and Sadducees, they were blinded by their religion. They could not accept it freely like a child because they were clinging so fiercely to their rules and regulations. And they couldn't believe that this righteous, they might not have considered him righteous, religious leader was coming along and uplifting children, was uplifting sinners. It was scandalous. The salvation that Jesus brought was offered at a table, a meal of grace that no amount of following rules and regulations could earn you a place at that table. And that's when Jesus sat at the table with Levi, a tax collector. And the tax collectors were of the Jew. They were their own people. They were the Jews. The Romans would appoint their own Jews to become tax collectors. They collected the money, and they could collect a little bit more. The tax may be 10, but they may charge you 12 and then keep the extra. And that was not uncommon. So there was scorn among the other people for tax collectors. And the religious leaders were indignant. They were upset that this Jesus was sitting and eating with Levi, a tax collector. And that's why Jesus says, I came for sinners. I came to share this table with them. I came to open my life up to them and welcome them in to a feast. Just come and get the what I have for you, and you haven't earned it. Not your childlike innocence, but your childlike acceptance of what King Jesus has to offer. So we need to be careful in our thinking, like Pharisees or Sadducees, that we have earned or deserve our place at the table by our good works, by our deeds, by our knowledge of the scriptures. That we have a place at God's table because we deserve to be there, or we're better than those that aren't at the table. Our very doing can become the undoing of the gospel, of the great gift that's offered. And that's what happens as we tend to move further on, maybe, or as we tend to look and forget our childlike acceptance when God offered acceptance and welcomeness into his family. When we are baptized and we come out of that water and we are like it calls us a babe in Christ. And for those of you who've been baptized, just try to remember when you first rose out of that water, how the past was totally done away with, how you were purely accepted. And that type of feeling of acceptance, of worth, of being in God's presence, of knowing that there is not rejection, is how Levi and these felt when Jesus sat down and ate with them. Because the rest of society would have nothing of that. And that's probably why we find the excitement of Zacchaeus, right? Zacchaeus, the wee little man that climbed the sycamore tree because he wanted to see Jesus. And when Jesus walked by, he said, Zacchaeus, you come down. I'm going to eat at your house today. Could you imagine Zacchaeus? Zacchaeus, nobody wanted to eat with Zacchaeus, except maybe other sinners, the least of these. But Zacchaeus is a tax collector. To say I'm going to go and eat at Zacchaeus' house, people will be like, what? You're going to eat with Zacchaeus? Do you not know who Zacchaeus is? Yeah, he's a wee little man, but he's big in sin. He's not worthy for you to go eat with him. And we may not get the big deal of that was scandalous. That is crazy. That a religious leader would want to go and eat with Zacchaeus. And that's why Zacchaeus was so excited and so happy. Because we need to understand and not take this lightly. Here's an example of what it meant for those that would be invited to feast at the table of grace with Jesus. It would be impossible to overestimate the impact these meals must have had upon the poor and the sinners. By accepting them as friends and equals, Jesus had taken away their shame, humiliation, and guilt. By showing them that they mattered to him as people, he gave them a sense of dignity and released them from their old captivity. The physical contact he must have had with them at the table, reference John 13:25, and which he obviously never dreamed of disallowing, Luke 7:38-39, must have made them feel clean and acceptable. Moreover, because Jesus was looked upon as a man of God and a prophet, they would have interpreted his gesture of friendship as God's approval of them as people. They are now acceptable to God. Their sinfulness, ignorance, uncleanness have been overlooked, and it was no longer being held against them. Because that's what the religious leaders of that time did. They equated the sin with the person. Sin is not acceptable to God. The person's not acceptable to God. And could you imagine the feeling inside when Jesus would come by and say, I want to eat with you today. I want to share a meal. It was more than food. It was an acceptance. Just as Jesus many times called those people before he would heal them, before he would pardon their sins, He would often call them son or daughter, making them feel a part of the family. And that's what that table meal was. Jesus was saying, you are family with God. You are family with me. I accept you in my presence. Because of nothing you've done, just take it like a child. The inclusion of sinners in the community of salvation symbolized in table fellowship is the most dramatic expression of the ragamuffin gospel and the merciful love of the redeeming God. It's a great quote. These meals were meant to say you are worthy. These were meals of more than food for the body, but they were sustenance for the soul. They were an expression of a merciful love from God. And that's what we're offered by God in his grace and mercy. Last refuge, we talked about how it's never ending mercies, how his mercies are new every day. And the acceptance of that mercy is offered at a meal at the table. The meal at the table was so much more than we have today. It was saying, I welcome you. Accept this feast of grace. Accept this meal of meaningfulness you have in the kingdom. Come feast at God's table. Accept your place like a child, acknowledging that it is the Lord that offers this gift. Just come running, because Jesus welcomed the children. He blessed them one by one. We have to accept this gift of fellowship at the Lord's table, pulling up a high chair and sitting in it and knowing we have done nothing to deserve it. It is all the good grace of the Lord. So when you're sitting at the table, look to your left and look to your right. Look at the others that are with us, the leftovers, the leftouts, the rejected, the downtrodden. And don't look down on anyone saying they're not acceptable at the table, because when you look down on them, you will see the face of Christ in them. They are just as worthy at the table as we are. For we have done nothing to deserve our place here, but it is a place set for us in which we can come. The leftovers and the left outs are welcomed by God's graciousness, and the server is King Jesus, who gladly distributes freely to all. There's a great song by Audio Adrenaline. It's quite an old song from the 80s. Some of the previous Soma kids that have come through there, they're adults now, have sang this song. We've sang it when we go on mission trips and other things. And it's Father's house. Come and go with me to my Father's house. Come and go with me to my Father's house. It's a big, big house with lots and lots of rooms. It's a big, big table with lots and lots of food. My Father has a very big house with lots of rooms. I've done nothing to deserve a place at the table with so much food. A table set of grace and mercy at which we can feast upon every day, and it's replenished every day. Be excited and share that we are blessed to sit at God's table. And in sharing that blessing, we shout out to the joy of King Jesus that he invites us in to his presence to feast on grace and mercy and love and kindness, and to invite others to this big, big table in this big, big house of our fathers. Thanks. Be blessed. Be a blessing. Share the great news about the table set by Jesus, where we can feast in the Father's love and mercy.